Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with Part 9, the Latin American Patriots, from America's Assignment with Destiny by Manly P. Hall. The Latin American Patriots. The early colonist of the Latin American countries was dominated by the Spaniards, and the several colonies which they had established were governed by Spanish viceroys until the rise of the libertarians. It is therefore useful to examine the condition of secret societies in Spain during the era of the conquest and the centuries which followed. The fate of Spain and the rapid decline of the power of that country was strongly influenced by the Inquisition. The Inquisition was established in Spain in 1233, but its original sphere of influence was largely confined to the Kingdom of Aragon. Ferdinand and Isabella, remembered for their participation in the financing of Columbus, were directly responsible for the promotion of the Inquisitional program. About 1481, the Queen brought the Inquisition to Castile, and 2 years later the notorious Torquemada was named Grand Inquisitioner of Spain. For the 18 years he filled this office, Torquemada averaged 10,000 executions annually, while some of the victims of the Holy Office were sacrificed to the political ambitions of powerful families. The majority was accused of heresy. This convenient term seemed to have been applied generously to those intellectuals whose mental horizons had been broadened by the educational institutions which flourished under the Moors. The heretics were the liberals, the progressives, and such as favored the rights of man. The secret association of spies, fantasies, and informers, which served the Inquisitional court, were the agents of a determined effort to destroy the philosophers, scholars, and mystics who refused to be converted to the prevailing concept of salvation. The zeal and thoroughness of the Inquisitioners implied that heretical tendencies were strong, and that the Church was in a fair way to lose its control over the Spanish conscience. There was an abrupt revolution against Charles V in 1520, when he attempted to limit the traditional liberties of his people. The secret society, which was then led by Toledo, was suppressed but not destroyed. It reappeared in 1821 as the Comuneros, the Confederation of the Communists, a group dedicated to the overthrow of the Spanish monarchy. As this revival coincides closely with the revolutionary outbreaks among the Spanish colonists in America, more than a coincidence may be expected. In 1726, the Grand Lodge of England granted a patent for the establishment of a Masonic lodge at Gibraltar, and another was founded the following year at Madrid. The Inquisition, which still exercised considerable power, persecuted the orders so diligently that the Spanish Masons were forced to adopt an elaborate program of secrecy. The lodges, however, found temporary liberty and considerable opportunity for political achievement. During the confusion caused by the Napoleonic Wars, Masonry was later again suppressed by Ferdinand VII, so that such lodges as continued to function concealed their activities under other names. The Grand Orient of Madrid was in secret correspondence with those French lodges which were taking so large a part in the conditioning of the people of France. The Zoroastrian rite attracted prominent members of the Spanish military, and it was always expedient to have friends in the military. The Brazilian Emperor, Dom Pedro I, was elected Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Brazil in 1825. Heckethorn notes that the turbulent republics of South America all had their Masonic lodges, which were in many cases political clubs in disguise. The Grand Lodge of Mexico was instituted in 1825, but there was Masonic activity in that country prior to that date. The Masonic conviction of liberty, equality, and fraternity must have been attractive to progressive Catholics, for even priests associated themselves with the lodges. Many prominent Latin Americans of the period of the Revolution were educated in Europe or were in contact with enthusiasts returning to their homeland, indoctrinated with the means and ends of the French Revolutionists. With secret societies intensely active in Spain and Portugal, many royalists, though faithful children of the church, privately associated themselves with concepts of libertarianism, which excited the imagination and appealed to the instinct of the adventurous. The drift of the esoteric traditions from Spain was openly acknowledged during the Napoleonic era, and, though later suppressed in the large centers of population, continued to inflame afflicted classes in the Spanish colonies. Historical references, however, are meager due to the Inquisition, and even the heroes were reluctant to commit themselves to membership in organizations regarded as highly subversive by the Holy Office. Nor should the secret traditions which lingered among the Indian tribes of the several regions be overlooked. The mystical and philosophical overtones of the European groups were in broad agreement with the occult religious teachings of the pre-Columbian priesthoods. Through a mingling of aspirations and convictions, the Creoles, Mestizos, and Indians found not only a common ground, but were also inspired to a program of mutual support, protection, and if necessary, concealment. These factors, though of slight interest to the literal historian, have fascination for the political psychologist. There are persistent reports that the secret societies of the Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas continued long after the conquest, guarded by the reticent aborigines who refused to renounce their ancient cultural institutions. Although it may be difficult to trace the rumors, there are elusive reports identifying most of the political reformers of the Latin American countries. With the fraternities and societies of the Indian tribes, Benito Juarez was suspected of such affiliations, and the followers of Pancho Villa were outspoken on this subject. There are vast areas still comparatively unexplored south of the Rio Grande. The primitive religions are powerful in these regions, and wherever the old faiths survive, the esoteric doctrine is served and protected, and the occult arts are cultivated. General Simon Bolivar. In the case of Simon Bolivar, 1783 through 1830, is exemplified the effect of direct contact with the European secret societies. From his political prophecies, it is evident that Bolivar was not only a brilliant statesman, but also an intellectual liberal. He read extensively, and his favorite authors were Rousseau, Montesquieu, Hobbes, Helvetius, Holbach, Hume, and Spinoza. A man so naturally emotional, so strongly inclined towards mysticism, and at the same time so moved and dominated by internal pressures, were naturally turned to philosophy for inspiration, guidance, and comfort. Though a devout Catholic, he was one of those Latin American heroes who refused to accept the revolutionary tendencies of his church. Bolivar witnessed the coronation of Napoleon, but was less impressed by the imperial crown than by the tremendous personal influence which Bonaparte exercised over his followers. While in France and Italy, the liberator contacted the various groups that were working quietly but relentlessly to accomplish the freedom of the human mind. The democratic ideology converted him completely, as it proved by his vow at Rome. On the occasion, Bolivar and his tutor, Simon Rodriguez, stood on the summit of the Holy Hill. Suddenly the young man fell on his knees and, addressing Rodriguez, cried out, "I swear before you, I swear by the God of my forefathers, I swear by my forefathers, I swear by my native country that I shall never allow my hands to be idle, nor my soul to rest until I have broken these shackles which chain us to Spain." It was during his European travel that Bolivar joined the Masonic Order. Michael Vacher dramatizes the Masonic associations of the young man by an episode which occurred while Bolivar was in his stateroom at sea. Bolivar came across the Freemason's diploma. He unrolled the great printed sheet which showed a curtain hanging in an antique temple. It bore the different symbols: level, trowel, square, compass, the 3 points, and the mallet. Also crouching sphinx. Bolivar recalled his introduction to the Lodge of Cadiz, whither he had been drawn by curiosity rather than conviction. He had taken oath to accept no legitimate government in his country, save one elected by the full vote of the people, and to strive with all his might to establish a republican system. Later, in Paris, Bolivar was raised to master in the Lodge of the Nine Sisters. There is a noble monument in the principal square of Caracas, his birthplace, which carries the bold words, Simon Bolivar, liberator of Venezuela, New Granada, Ecuador, and Peru, and founder of Bolivia. The United States viewed with deep sympathy the struggles of the Latin American countries. The stepson of George Washington sent to Bolivar through Brother Lafayette a miniature and medallion, including a lock of Washington's hair as a token of esteem. But if General Bolivar enjoyed the sympathy of those who loved freedom, he also suffered deeply and cruelly for his convictions. Like most who have served unselfishly to liberate their fellow men, he died a tired, broken old man at the age of 47. As Barra writes, in exile under an alien roof, clad in a borrowed nightshirt. The vision which the liberator left to his people can be estimated from a few quotes. America, said Bolivar in 1823, is not a problem. Neither is it a fact. It is the highest and most irrefutable assignment of destiny. In a document dated 1829, the liberator wrote, I have achieved no other good than independence. That was my mission. The nations I have founded will, after prolonged and bitter agony, go into an eclipse, but will later emerge as states of the one great republic, America. Miguel Hidalgo. The career of Hidalgo, 1753 through 1811, emphasizes the prominence of certain political clubs built around libertarian principles imported from the secret societies of Spain and the rise of local organizations to advance the cause of social justice in Mexico under various protective pseudonyms, such as protective clubs, literary circles, and social empires. The spirit of liberty extended its sphere of influence from the European lodges of liberation to the Valley of Mexico. The Masonic membership of certain key figures involved in the Mexican struggle for independence should not be accepted as proof that these men were directly associated with esoteric organizations. The condition of Freemasonry at the time, however, and its place in the descent of the great plan for liberty, equality, and fraternity constitutes a tangible link between the secret schools of the ancient world with their moral and ethical convictions, and the cause of human enlightenment which was so strongly championed by the great Mexican patriot. The patronymic name Hidalgo, which means son of somebody, infers a degree of aristocracy or minor nobility. Miguel Hidalgo, called the father of Mexican independence, was ordained to the priesthood in 1778, and from that time on was in frequent difficulties with his religious superiors. Though of slight stature and humble appearance, Hidalgo had improved his years at the Royal and Pontifical University of Mexico. He early showed an inclination for history and political science. Even as a young man, he dedicated his life to the emancipation of the Mexican people, especially the Indians. He favored the writings of the French rationalists, particularly the theories of Rousseau and Voltaire, as these applied to the rights of man. He was denounced to the Inquisition at Valladolid for unorthodoxy. He was accused of reading prohibited books and of favoring Jansenism. It was particularly pointed out that he carried with him in his wanderings a copy of the Quran. Concerning the researches of the Inquisition, author Howard Nall writes, in the meantime the Holy Office had pursued an investigation by its usual methods and had discovered that Hidalgo was developing revolutionary tendencies, that he was accustomed to speak of monarchs as tyrants, and that he cherished aspirations for political liberty. He had little respect for the Index Expurgatorius, and was so extensively read in current French literature that he had become thoroughly imbued with French ideas, or as it was subsequently called, he was Alfrancisto. He had, by the direct evidence of 13 witnesses cited before the tribunal, been guilty of heretical utterances sufficient to consign him to the stake. The officers of the Inquisition, however, admitted that there were some doubts on certain points, and to the amazement of Hidalgo himself, the case against him was suspended and the evidence filed for future reference. It was referenced to in due time. The principal heresy concerned Hidalgo's program for the economic and social improvement of the Indians and mestizos. He was ultimately deprived of his benefice, and by his 47th year was completely dedicated to the liberation of his people from foreign tyranny and domestic oppression. Of special interest was the sudden development throughout the provinces of what were called social and literary clubs. These sprang up rapidly, but no satisfactory history of their origin or the persons responsible for the idea are available. In some way, these groups eluded the Holy Office and from their inception were dedicated to the same ends that dominated similar secret societies in Europe. In 1808, Hidalgo joined one of these clubs, in Querétaro, immediately became its principal leader and extended his influence throughout this chain of available organizations. This circumstance probably explains the well-authenticated report that Hidalgo became a member of a Masonic fraternity in middle life despite the edicts of the Vatican. Gould, in his military lodges, stated positively that Jose Maria Morelos, another priest devoted to the cause of Hidalgo, was a Mason. He was also executed as an unconfessed heretic. It was in one of these clubs that Hidalgo met Ignacio Allende, who later became the military genius of the revolution. The appearance of a network of societies dedicated to the private conviction of political liberty may well witness a contact between European groups and the New World. Conditions in Spain were such as to justify a discrete program of organizations in Mexico. Hidalgo's revolution was short-lived, and his career as a leader of rebellion lasted only 1 year. Allende was executed on the 26th of June, 1811. Hidalgo was first degraded by the ecclesiastical court and then turned over to the civil courts. He suffered the auto de fe, and on the 30th of July, 1811, received a military execution. He met death heroically, and his last words were a prayer that heaven would favor the independence of his people. Although Hidalgo's name is revered throughout Mexico, little has been written about him which is available to his countrymen. The details of his career probably have been considered inflammatory and contrary to the present interest of the church and state. Benito Pablo Juarez. On the 21st of March, in a little Zapotecan Indian village of some 20 families, was born Benito Juarez, 1806 through 1872, the emancipator of Mexico. He had no memory of his parents who died during his infancy, but, after numerous difficulties, succeeded in educating himself in law and became deeply involved in the political problems of his country. The policies of Juarez were brought to the attention of the United States by the London correspondent of the New York Tribune, an international exile by the name of Karl Marx. Juarez has been described as an agnostic, but a careful consideration of his attitude reveals not a rebellion against God, but against the theological institutions which burden the people of Mexico. This silent, inscrutable Indian belonged to a race moved inward by powerful convictions, but outwardly impassive. His God was the Father of freedom, served by a priesthood of libertarians. Juarez became a Mason in his youth. After the overthrow of the Maximilian Empire, Mexican Freemasonry was consolidated in 1868, Benito Juarez being one of its highest officials. Mackey's History of Freemasonry contains the following note. It would seem as if the authority of Juarez alone held these rights together, since at his death in 1872, although he was succeeded as president by his chief follower, Sebastian Lerado de Tara, also a prominent Freemason, dissensions arose, and they fell asunder. Alfredo Chavero, becoming Grand Master of the Grand Orient, and Jose Maria Mateos of the National Grand Lodge. General Francisco Javier Mina, another martyr to Mexican liberty, was a Freemason. Ignacio Comonfort, also a member of the fraternity, was Secretary of War under President Alvarez, and later was acting President of the Republic. He took an active part against the French invasion, but was killed by bandits or irregular troops in 1863. General Porfirio Diaz was an early supporter of Juarez, under whose influence he became a member of the Masonic fraternity. He attained the 33rd and was Sovereign Grand Commander of the Supreme Council of Mexico for many years. He was succeeded by his friend, General Manuel Gonzalez, 33rd, in 1880. Diaz was elected president in 1884 and remained in office until his resignation in 1911. General Mariano Escobedo, a close friend of Juarez and Diaz, was also a Mason and a member of the Supreme Council of Mexico. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.